Hello and welcome to our Sunday service and salon. I'm deTraci Regula and we are celebrating Ploiaphesia this weekend. And so we have just finished our celebration yesterday with our procession to the river where we launched our little ships. And so we are definitely in a festal mood, and I brought one of the ship models today that we have used, and this one dates back to Lorient. It's a lovely little Egyptian adorned boat. And Ploiaphesia, of course, is the Greco-Roman period festival that celebrates Isis as a goddess of navigation. And many of us may need a little bit more help navigating right now than perhaps we've felt in the past. So it's a good thing to recognize the change in seasons where navigation is supposed to get a little bit easier. Storms are supposed to be settling. The sea is supposed to be a bit calmer, at least in the Mediterranean. And so we are hoping that that transmits itself to all of our lives and that we all have a little bit easier time navigating without too many storms. But we'll see. Anyway, today's reading, since yesterday was also the International Day of Women, and this also happens to be the one in the sequence, it is Lady Lorient's scroll on, in fact, women. So let us listen to her words on the topic of the females. Lady Lorient writes, when I learned of the Fellowship of Isis many years ago, I decided to become a member, for they only asked that you honor the goddess. Yes, I thought, the goddess balances the concept of the god and would bring more feminine energy into the idea of deity. Surely we need more matriarchal energy in our world. Women would not send their sons and daughters into war. Women would not spend millions for destructive weapons as opposed to the possibility of better schools for their children. Women would most likely see their neighbor countries in a more loving light and would not have to be so competitive with them. Women would prefer more art and music, I believe, love and beauty in the world, as opposed to the ever-eternal gun-toting kinds of entertainment most men prefer. Women might even declare football banned because it is a very violent game. It's interesting, when she was writing this a number of years ago, this was before, a lot of the very debilitating effects of all those concussions, especially on young men and their young brains, has come to light. And so she may have a point, though I think all of the competitive sports may have their role to play in being at least a substitute for the much worse violence of war and other types of conflict. In ancient Egyptian times, Lady Lorient writes, women had more equality than in all the other countries of that time. They were even more advanced in this regard than we were 80 years ago, when American women could not even vote. In many countries today, women's rights have been trampled. Surely it is time to reevaluate why this is. Male superiority is a myth and needs to be buried along with so much that is outmoded. How we attire ourselves today has become more homogeneous and is tilting toward the masculine, with women wearing pants in greater and greater numbers. It is interesting to note fashion through the years. The Egyptian fashions were quite similar for both male and female. Both sexes wore jewelry, perfumes, and even makeup. Today, fashions for men have remained more or less constant. A two-piece suit, starchy shirt, and the absurd and useless tie. Isn't it about time they begin to add color and beauty to their costume? Women need equal pay for equal work and must be accepted as spiritual leaders, which is their true inclination. May the goddess prevail. Well, I would dispute one detail on that. At least when men wear ties, they do have the opportunity to add a little color and patterning to their formal attire. And really, if anything, things have gotten more and more casual, though we are possibly turning back to a more traditional requirement for attire. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. for me, I believe it's wonderful to have the freedom to adorn ourselves as we will and dress as we will. And as long as it doesn't interfere with whatever duty that we may be performing, I see no harm in it. But perhaps someone else may have a different opinion. So anyway, yesterday there were many protests, marches, and other things being held throughout the county and elsewhere on the topic of women's rights, and certainly many people were participating in those. So you may have been one of them, and if you have something to share from something that you experienced over the weekend festivities, please feel free to do so. Welcome. I'm just discussing today from the scrolls that Lady Lorian created. We're discussing women. And of course, yesterday was International Women's Day. So many people were out and about in various celebrations and protests and marches and different activities celebrating women. And that's certainly something that we've always been doing here at the Temple of Isis for many, many years. As Lady Lorian once said, God has had plenty of publicity. It's time for the goddess to have her say. And so while we don't deny the male side of things, that we just feel that our role is to elevate the female side of things a bit more thoroughly. So that is, in fact, what we attempt to do each and every day. So if you have any comments or things that you would like to contribute, one of the innovations that Lady Lorian felt very strongly about was that when we do our Sunday ceremonies and other ceremonies, that there must always be an opportunity for someone to bring their own energy into it. It's not meant to be totally one person talking to a group. There should be some interplay back and forth between those that participate. And so if you do have anything you want to add to the comments, please go ahead and do so. And what about you? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I do.
Do you mind me putting you on camera? We're broadcasting.
No.
Okay. Don't want to startle you.
No, and this is from Caroline Casey. The term protest means to grab your balls and speak for something. The pro and then the test is the testes. So she says when women do it, it's proviating.
Well, that's an interesting point of view. And oddly enough, I don't know if you saw Thor and his protest sign, because he went to one of the protests locally. And his protest sign basically was along the lines of what you were saying, that to quote in somewhat crude language, that if men have big enough balls, they'll defend women's rights. And so it's interesting that you've brought up the protest aspect of protesting. Okay.
The meaning of words,
It's really fascinating, and those meanings resonate to us even when we don't necessarily know. There's something very deep that supports that, and even in things like punning, often you see another dimension to language that you might have missed. And our foundress, Lady Lorian, was a great punster. And so we always enjoyed hearing what she had to say because it was often very, very amusing. And in this, she was following ancient Egyptian tradition, because what we find in a lot of the hieroglyphic inscriptions is that they did, in fact, do wordplay and puns. We probably are only perceiving a tiny percentage of that, because when you're surrounded by a living language, of course you're more aware of the nuances and how, saying this word rather than that word can affect the meaning and yet still convey the essential meaning the same way. So she definitely was following an ancient Egyptian tradition. One visual pun that we sometimes see is the symbol of the Ankh is also the word for mirror. So sometimes the Egyptians would make ankhs in the shape of a mirror, So there would be kind of this doubling of meaning and intent. And for those that knew that the Ankh was the same word as the mirror, having a mirror that was an Ankh just kind of added, I guess you would say, another reflection onto everything that we know about the word. So it's important to see these resonances and to be alert to them, because it can enrich our lives and also enrich our understanding of meaning, which is so important. And as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, yesterday, and actually this whole week, because the ancient day of Ploiaphesia was technically March 5th. It's one of the few fixed holidays that we have from the faith of Isis. And so normally we celebrate by going down to the river and launching little boats exactly on the 5th. But that was a Wednesday this week, and it just didn't seem that we were going to connect with that many people. So we went ahead and shifted our prep day to Friday and then our procession day to Saturday, and had a lovely time going down to the waters of the Russian River, which were quite turbulent, and took our little boats very, very quickly. When we do this, we create boats using these little boat-shaped molds, and we put flowers in the molds, and then we fill them with water and freeze them. So our little boats go, sailing off quite satisfactorily, but they also are totally biodegradable. We're basically offering water to water with a few flowers thrown in. And I often think what people must consider about it when they are downstream and suddenly they see all these little, collections of flowers floating towards them. And I wonder if they think, well, what was going on upstream? What kind of ceremony? What kind of celebration? So that is something that we do each year. And we may actually be doing a similar ceremony in April, which is the Sacrum Nivalis, and it is a kind of the second half of the launching of the ships of Isis. That was a holiday that celebrated the arrival of ships from Egypt to Italy and Rome and other places in the Mediterranean. Those were the first grain shipments that would come through. And so there was a special festival to welcome the restoration of the grain ships coming. And something that a lot of people are really not aware of is we tend to have this kind of image of like Spanish Armada ships in our head, or 18th century schooners or something like that. But a lot of the Roman ships were actually multi-level. They would have, massive banks of rowers as well as sails, and they actually were more along the size of a small cruise ship than, our idea of a little boat, just kind of bouncing along the waters. They were very serious ships, and they carried a lot of grain and really had a big impact on the places that they were serving. And they would, sail from Egypt, which was considered kind of the granary of the Roman Empire. One of the reasons it was so desirable to the Romans was that it grew so much grain. And so when that harvest would come in, or start to come in, these ships would go forth, and usually at where they launched, there would be a temple or shrine of Isis, and then where they arrived, there would be a temple or shrine of Isis. And so you had her at both ends of your journey, and frequently that was the first foothold that Isis would have in a different place, because the Egyptian sailors coming from Egypt with these ships would have a little altar or something to make offerings, and then of course they'd make offerings when they returned, and before you knew it, you had an establishment of faith and worship there. And the first connections with Isis in Greece, for example, was about 6th century BCE. So it was quite relatively early, and it was also usually in the port towns that first would have that connection with Isis. Both the ports along the shores of the Mediterranean, but also the ports along the rivers. And so there were many places that the worship of Isis went into, traveling along the major rivers. And that still, is one of the reasons that we have so many archaeological discoveries of Isis temples very deep into Europe, but it's often along the waterways. Not invariably, but very, very frequently. So, all right, well, I've been chatting along here. Is there anything we should be attending to? If you have any requests or something that you want to raise up, this is a good moment to do so. So please, feel free to add them to the comments, and we'll be glad to address them. So I also want to tell everyone that another one of our big events, of course, will be coming up in May, the first weekend of May, which is our annual symposium. And that's one of our major events that the Temple of Isis itself puts on. There'll be many classes, presentations, plays, rites, all sorts of things. And this year, for the first time, we are also celebrating International Labyrinth Day on May 3rd, and that's right in the heart of our symposium. And so we will be doing a little thing with our 42-foot wide Ankh labyrinth, which was designed by Lady Lorian. And we were approached by the International Labyrinth Society asking if we would be doing anything, and of course we said we would. So we're going to do a little presentation on it and then open up the labyrinth for people to walk for the afternoon. And there'll be some other information on labyrinths and mazes and so on. And there are hundreds of labyrinths around the world that are doing something for International Labyrinth Day. So it's the whole day is going to be spent in labyrinths, if you so desire. There's a number of them that are really around the world, and we're supposed to do our ceremony in each place at 1 p.m. So whatever country you're in, you may find that there is someone doing a labyrinth ceremony at 1 p.m. not that far away from you. So it'll be sort of a 24-hour cycle where each hour, I suspect there's some places across the Pacific that may not have labyrinths, but everywhere else will be celebrating the magic of labyrinths. And of course, the difference between a labyrinth and a maze is that the labyrinth has only one path. You cannot get lost in a labyrinth, technically speaking. You just walk through and reach the center and then walk back out. A maze, on the other hand, is one that is kind of designed to thwart you from getting to the exit. So it's a little bit different experience. With the labyrinth, it's, you go in and then you go out, and you are protected on your path because there's only one way to go in and to go out. So much less frustrating experience potentially with a labyrinth than you have with a maze. Of course, ours cannot be frustrating. Ours is open air. We don't have like high hedges or anything, so you will just be able to find your way to the center very readily, I am confident. All right. Is there anything else that we should attend to today? I see Nina's out there. Nice to see you. I see Meredith, Anna, and Carl. If you're still here, welcome and thank you for joining us. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we will go ahead and close. As always, we are grateful to our remarkable foundress, Lady Lorian Beignet, for all that she established for us to continue, and to all of our teachers, those who have guided us in one way or another and have put light upon our paths in so many ways, all the authors and workshop teachers and priests and priestesses and clergy, both of our faith and others, that have illuminated us in some way, we give our thanks. And to the gracious goddess Isis, in whom all things are possible, we give our thanks and ask her divine blessings. into each and every one of us. I wish you a very good week filled with insight and understanding. May you have everything you need to succeed and to feel good and to heal. And may all good things come. God bless.